Okay, so there's a really high-stakes standoff brewing in the Caribbean right now. We're talking warships, oil tankers, a whole storm of accusations. And it all centers on one country, Venezuela. So in this explainer, we're going to cut through all the noise and try to figure out what is really driving this escalating conflict with the United States. So let's get right into it. What's actually happening on the ground? Or maybe I should say at sea. Well, what we're seeing right now is a full-blown military and economic pressure campaign, and it's pushing tensions to a real breaking point. And the most visible sign of all this pressure, a U.S. naval blockade. Just picture it. American warships are circling the region, and they are ready to intercept any of the 30 or so sanctioned tankers trying to move Venezuelan oil. And believe me, they are not just making threats. They've already seized one. So what's the official story from Washington? Well, they're calling it a crackdown on narco-terrorism. They claim these tankers are being used for drug smuggling. But as this analysis points out, these are some really serious accusations being made with very little evidence and certainly no trial, which, raises a pretty big question. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Is this whole thing really a war on drugs? Or is that just a convenient cover story for something else? Something much, much bigger. And this is where the plot really starts to thicken. Because if you actually look at the official reasons that have been given for this whole pressure campaign, you start to see a very clear and honestly, a very revealing pattern. See, at first, it was all about migration. Then, the whole narrative morphed into a war on drugs. And now? Well, now the conversation has landed squarely on the one thing that's been under the surface all along: oil. It's all about Venezuela's most valuable resource. And hey, if you had any doubt, this quote from a top White House advisor pretty much lays it all out on the table. The U.S. government isn't just talking about drugs anymore. They are explicitly framing this as a fight to get back what they consider stolen American property. And what is that property? The entire oil industry that American companies helped build. So to really understand how we got to this point, we need to rewind the clock a bit. This conflict didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It's really the culmination of more than 100 years of complicated history, all surrounding Venezuela's oil. And this number right here, wow. This number tells you just how high the stakes are. We're talking about 300 billion barrels of proven crude oil reserves. And to put that in perspective, that's not just a lot of oil, it is the largest proven reserve on the entire planet. For decades, Western companies were pretty much at the heart of Venezuela's oil industry. But as the country's own influence grew, it was a founding member of OPEC after all, so did its desire to control its own resources. And this tension really came to a head in two key moments. First, a negotiated nationalization back in 1972, and then a much more confrontational one in 2007. And that 2007 nationalization? Yeah, that is the real sticking point for the United States. From Washington's perspective, American companies had poured decades of investment and work into the country, and then they were just kicked out, their assets seized, without what they considered fair compensation. So, this long history has created two totally different ways of looking at the exact same situation. We're not just talking about a simple business dispute here. This is a really deep-seated clash over huge ideas like national identity, sovereignty, and ownership. On one side, you have the U.S., basically arguing that American ingenuity and money built this entire industry, and taking it away was nothing short of theft. But on the other side, you have Venezuela, which firmly believes that the oil under its ground is the birthright of its people, and that it can never truly be owned by a foreign company. Okay, so what does the official rule book say? International law. Well, it generally supports Venezuela's argument here. The principle is pretty clear. Natural resources belong to the country that they're in. Foreign companies can ask for compensation for their assets, sure, but they can't claim ownership of the actual oil in the ground. And this legal and political high ground has actually earned Venezuela some support on the world stage. You've got China calling the U.S. actions bullying, Russia is calling for calm, and even regional powers like Brazil and Mexico are critical of the U.S. Meanwhile, inside Venezuela itself, all this pressure has kind of had the opposite effect of what was intended. It's just fueled these huge nationalistic protests against what many there see as American overreach. So that brings us right back to the present day. We have warships in the Caribbean, a situation that could escalate at any moment, and with most of the international support for Venezuela being just talk, the next move? Well, it's really up to Washington. And that pressure has been building up relentlessly, step by step. It started with just threats, then it moved to actually seizing tankers on the high seas, and now it has escalated to a partial naval blockade that's really aimed at cutting off Venezuela's economic lifeline. Which leaves us with one final and really crucial question. Is this intense economic pressure the end game for Washington, or are we just watching the opening act of a direct military intervention? The answer to that question isn't just going to decide the fate of Venezuela. It could reshape the future of the entire region.